Hey guys, thanks for joining me here on Teslanomics. Going to do a quick live stream right now about what's going on with the Paris Agreement. I normally don't do live streams on Wednesdays, but this is just such a big deal that I thought it would be important to kind of share with you what I found and what I think about it, and get your thoughts and opinions, really. So, chat is enabled, super chat is enabled. I don't have a lot of stuff scripted or planned out for this, but I'm going to kind of walk you through what I found and love to hear what you think. So, leave me a comment there in the chat window. If you have some thoughts on this. So first and foremost, let me just read you the little news blurb. President Trump is expected to withdraw the United States from the Paris Climate Agreement. 3 officials with knowledge of the decision said, making good on a campaign pledge, but severely weakening the landmark 2015 climate change accord that committed nearly every nation to take action to curb the warming of the planet. So, here's the deal is that Trump recently apparently was deciding on this and is now said to have made the decision, but hasn't made an official statement, and the final language of it may be changing. Now, he is actually being encouraged by Secretary of State Rex Tillerson to remain in part of the Paris Accord, and he could continue to lobby on this. But all signs right now, or it seems to be somewhat definitive, that he has decided to exit. So we'll see, I guess, as more details come out, what's going on here. But the New York Times did a fantastic job putting together some data on this. And so I want to show you their visualization and walk you through it and kind of the main points. And then I want to dig into the data myself and kind of just honestly some live analysis. I haven't looked at this data before. I pulled it into the software I use, Tableau software. So you can kind of see how the sausage is made here. And let me know if you have questions as we go along there. So first and foremost, let's take a look at the Paris data. So you can see that essentially this red line represents business as usual. And there are some points here about that business as usual means that the climate would continue to get warmer and warmer. I believe it's above 4 degrees Celsius. But what happens here is I scroll down, you can see they did a great job. And there you have it. President Trump is expected to withdraw, of course. The greenhouse gas emissions, if they continued on this path, would reach 69 gigatons by 2030. Of course, CO2 is directly related to the warming of the planet, which then leads to all the other kind of climate change things and all the problems that we're seeing. Now, in 2015, almost 200 countries, so almost everybody in the world, signed the Paris Agreement. There's a great video documentary, I guess, by Leonardo DiCaprio about Before the Flood, called Before the Flood. And he, in there, he shows and talks about it, and I think it's a spectacular film. You should go check that out. Now, if everyone did what they said they would do, and we met all those targets, this would reduce global emissions to 56 gigatons in 2030. So actually, relatively soon in terms of getting every country in the world to make a change. Now, the United States is the world's second largest carbon polluter, and our pledge, which I guess is off the table now, equated to just over 1/5, about 21% overall of this agreement. So we were substantial, I guess when it comes to it. Now, the U.S. emissions are estimated to be at 6.7 gigatons of CO2 equivalents per year by 2025, compared to 5.3 gigatons of CO2 equivalents by 2025 if we had followed through with our plans here. Now, the good news is that Trump won't be in office this entire time. So hopefully, that doesn't mean that all is lost in the U.S. In terms of this, of still getting back on track here. And, one of the big things, regardless of where you sit on the political spectrum and what your views are, you have to admit that the political environment is a pendulum. It swings back and forth. So if history repeats itself as it continues to do, in hopefully less than 4 years now, but at most less than 8, we'll have somebody in office in the United States that actually believes in science and believes in climate change and things like that. So with the U.S. pulling out, you can see what that would do to it there. The largest polluter, China, is continuing their mission, and I've talked about China before pretty fondly because China is in fact the global leader in EVs. They are expected to emerge as the new global leader in climate, which is great. I'm very encouraged by what they're doing on this front. I'm not a politician. I'm not somebody that's whose opinion on the overall state of the country has any merit. But when it comes to climate change and EVs, that's where I kind of spend a lot of my time and focus. So here you can kind of see, what percentage they are of this, and it's pretty substantial. Then you have the European Union and other developed nations. Of course, the EU, there was a big election in France recently, and there's a lot of folks there that are basically saying, like, they're going to continue this path. They're going to keep going down this path. And then from there, you have essentially, other developing nations, specifically India is a big concern. Give me 1 second here. Are you guys seeing this okay on the video? Let me just check. It looks like I'm getting some errors here. Nope, it looks like everything's good. Okay, just wanted to make sure that you guys can see that and hear that and everything. All right, I'm trying to set this up. It looks like this is set out as unlisted, which means people aren't seeing it, which isn't good. So if you guys are seeing it, that must mean that you're on. There it is. Hello. Now we're going public. If you're seeing it, that must mean that you follow my email list. So thank you for doing that. Okay, so let's keep going here. So what we're looking at here is essentially all of the different countries, or at least the big chunks of them, and what they mean for hitting that Paris pledge versus the business as usual amount. Now, there's some things to know here about this business as usual number is that it's not exactly true, because there are a lot of companies and there are a lot of things that are already pushing us towards a more sustainable future, like Tesla and like a lot of these other companies. Hey, there you go. Now you guys can see it. All right, how's it going? Nice to see you all here. So with that, what the overall goal of the agreement was to limit global warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius, meaning, below 2 degrees Celsius. And they don't necessarily, this isn't a guarantee by any stretch of the imagination, as well as, there's no way to say of how well or how good people are going to actually meet these agreements. But I thought this visualization here, pushing the data out from 20, now until 2100, would be worth looking at. So this link is in the description. You can go check that out afterwards here, and you can kind of play with this and see. So this data actually comes to us. And let me see if I can switch over to that there. From the Climate Interactive group. This is a nonprofit group that looks and analyzes these kind of things. So they have some data on this, and I thought it might be fun to take a look. So actually, as I'm going along here, if you have questions about this, let me know what you think, and I can kind of try to answer them in real time. I'm looking at the chat down here, but I'm looking up here for my computer. So let me know what you think of that. Okay, so let's switch over to the data now. Boom, there we go. So this is a tool that I use called Tableau, and sorry if it's a little small and hard to read. That's probably just because a factor of if you're watching on a phone or something like that, but I'll try to keep it simple and easy to follow. Now, this data here, and I'm going to switch over to it so I can see it full screen, is pretty simple, right? If I take a look at just the raw data, it has the year, and then it has these different paths, essentially. And the metric is global tons of CO2 equivalents per year. Now, they didn't do it on the New York Times one, but I have it here all the way back to 1900. And so I thought this would be kind of fun to take a look. And now, the way this works is I'll create a new sheet, and I'll drag year up to columns. Not that you need to know how to do this. In fact, I need to massage this data a little bit. So I'm going to go edit my data source, and I'm going to pivot these a little bit. So I'm going to pivot the data like so. And then I'll call this path, and this is global tons. I have an actual, let me see, there it is. Global tons of CO2 per year. All right, then let's jump back over here, and this chart is gone, so let's delete that one. So here what I have now on my new sheet is I can look at the year, and again, growing all the way back to 1900, and then I can look at the global tons of CO2, and you can kind of see how that's going, and then what's happening here. This is all the projections, of course. And then I can actually show the path as a color, so it'll be a separate line for color. So if I were to zoom in here, this alone is pretty telling. This is, you know, everything up to 2017, and you can just kind of see the normal path and what's been going on. Then, you know, when I expand that back out, you can kind of see where everything else was. Let me add the path to the label here. And because I know my picture is taking up some of that, let me scooch that over a little bit for you. And maybe I can go here. So the reference scenario is the data that you saw in the New York Times article. And you can see that in the kind of the teal color here, and essentially the gigatons of CO2 on a cumulative basis is what I believe this is. Then you have the national plan. So this is where we would end up if the Paris stuff went into place. And again, this is projecting all the way out to 2100. I believe on the other one they were only going out to 2030. Which would be, in fact, let me just add a reference line here so we can kind of see where we'll be. So year, this, we'll just do an actual value. No. The value will be a parameter, and it'll be reference year. The value will be 2030. Boom, there you go. And the format is all wrong, but I guess I don't care that much. So you can see there's 2030, and this is what the New York Times was projecting right there. In fact, let me scoot this over just even more so that way you guys can see it. There we go. Hopefully that makes sense. So this is the scenario we're looking at, right? We would love to get below 2 degrees Celsius because scientists are all estimating essentially that is where that is where if we can get below that, then we can reverse a lot of the effects. Some of the reports out there say that we're already past that and it's kind of past the point of no return and we're all doomed, which sucks. But, you know, hopefully things like this agreement, regardless of whether or not the United States gets in there, can affect it. In fact, you know, what we could do is we could do a little what if scenario here. So if the U.S. pulls out and we represented 20% of it, we could probably come up with a new data set that basically adds this nation's plans number and adds it up by 20%. So let's see if I can do that real quick. This is a live demo, so if it goes wrong, it is to be expected. So let's say G tons CO2 without USA. And so this would be something like if path equals national plans, then this times 1.21 technically, otherwise this. Okay, let's try that. And let's see what this scenario would be like. So this is the without USA version. And where is it? Let me reset this view. In order to actually do this, I think I need to, let's replace that guy there. So you can see, yeah, essentially this is where we would end up by 2100. In fact, let me just filter on that. National plans. Yep. And then we'll drag, that's with and without the USA. I think if I drag it right here. Yeah. And then we drag this one to color and get rid of this. Yep, there we go. Okay, so you can see here is essentially that same data, but now I've reorganized it. So what you're seeing is the national plans and the national plans without the US. Let me label by this as well. There you go. So without the USA by 2030, we're looking at a 20% increase, 21% increase. So if the goal would have kept us at 55.9 gigatons, we're now at 67 gigatons. So it's actually quite a bit. And then going out to 2100, we're at over 103. So it's kind of crazy that the U.S. wants to do this, and it bums me out that I live in a country here. But kind of final thoughts, and I'll publish these on the web so you can see it after the fact. My final thought here is basically that we don't have to. If you believe in this stuff, then you can make the difference. There are so many ways that you can become more sustainable yourself, and in a large part, and if enough people do it, of course, it'll have a huge impact. And I don't kind of mean that. Like often, if you think of certain things, it's kind of bogus when people say that. But this, I feel really great about saying that, because I think that truly we can make a difference if we really kind of put our money and where our mouth is, so to speak. Me and my wife put together, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, what I'm calling a family sustainability plan. And we're moving right along. So I would encourage you to do the same. If you really care about this stuff, vote for one. Vote for people that you believe will support your views and have similar views as you, and will legislate that way. And then do what you can, hopefully a lot, to actually make this change in your own life. Just for an example, so our plan was to have all total electric vehicles, as well as our power coming from the sun. So far we have one EV and we have solar. I'm hoping to get my Tesla Powerwall sometime soon, which will help with reducing dependence on the grid as well. In California and San Diego, we do have a clean grid anyway, so it's not that big a deal. But still, it'll be even nicer to be totally kind of self-sufficient in that regard. And then once the Model 3 comes out, that's the plan for us, is that we'll have a Model S and a Model 3. But, you don't have to buy insanely expensive fancy cars in order to make this happen. Solar, for a lot of people, makes financial sense. So forget the climate change argument. It just makes financial sense. You're saving money in a lot of parts of the country. So there's that, right? That's a big one. Now, granted, I know a lot of people live in buildings and those things, but the point is that I think if you want to be the change, that you want to see in the world, then you have to change yourself, right? You have to be the one that actually makes this change. And as disheartening it is to see somebody that leads the richest country in the world, I'm not going to say the greatest country in the world because there's so many different ways you can slice that up. But certainly when it comes to climate, the U.S. is not the leader. And unfortunately, it looks like things like science and innovation and all that are falling by the wayside as well. So do what you can, vote, and change your behaviors and invest in those things that you believe in, if you believe in stuff like this. So I don't see any questions here right now. This was honestly just hopping on for a quick chat to share this news and kind of give you the data that I have. So thanks for joining me real briefly here, and I'll see you guys back here as a regular scheduled program tomorrow morning. Cheers.